welcome to another Case Closed review. My name is Kate, otherwise known as Narataki.
And I'm Alan, otherwise known as Hisui. And we are from ReverseThieves.com, as well as the Speakeasy podcast. If you go to ReverseThieves.com, you can get a bunch of blog posts as well as other cool podcasts.
And this time we are looking at Dokidoki PreCure from winter 2013. And just as a reminder, the Case Closed reviews are looks at the shows after we've completed them, and they sort of stand in contrast to the S.W.A.T reviews, which are reviews of the first episode. This one's a long time coming because PreCure lasts for the whole year until the next one starts, so...
And this guy is from Toei, and it is not streaming anywhere because...
They're fools. They're fools and full of foolishness. Dokidoki had sort of a card theme, and it featured the Card Kingdom, which was decimated, sort of, and kind of got thrown into our world, and there was a princess, and, you know, they had like a really kind of big story about kind of why the PreCure needed to exist, which was to restore the kingdom and to prevent the selfish from taking over the planet, because everyone has selfishness in their hearts.
We started with one cure who, spiraled into a bunch of cures, although we eventually find out that there was Cure Sword, who was a surviving knight from the Card Kingdom.
And she worked for the princess. And then, I think as the show goes on, of course, Mana, who is our main character, who I really liked, she was the class president, she was really capable, she was... I think of all the PreCure, she was the most leader-like. Like, she came off as able to, you're like, I get why people follow her and do what, she has a plan, she is active, she is confident, and I get why she's, like, a leader of a team.
Once again, if you go through PreCure, really, the original PreCure, really a duo, and... Smile, which we finished last year.
Cure Happy is probably one of the least competent leaders ever.
She's a fun character, but no one ever looked to Cure Happy for, responsible team head.
And that's one of the things that, not to get sidetracked and talk about Smile, but that's one of the things that made her feel very Sailor Moon-like. And she doesn't really come into it until, the end, the moment of need. Anyway, but in this one, I felt like we had the most competent leader we've ever seen. And then we had sort of her sidekick and best friend, Cure Diamond, and then also her other friend, Cure Rosetta. I thought it was kind of interesting that the three new PreCures in the series were all already friends. They were all really good friends. They were best friends with each other. So there wasn't a real change in their relationship or, now we have to get to know each other. But then it was almost like they made up for sort of that in Cure Sword, who is really standoffish and doesn't really want to be friends with anybody and doesn't know how to be. And then later, Cure Ace, who is really kind of snobbish to them.
And really kind of acts like, hey guys, you just being newbies with your PreCure thing. You don't even know the rules of the PreCure.
And just take a minute here to say, from this point on, spoilers for the series, because we can't really talk about the ending without, spoiling it. As we, get towards the end, this intense story about the Card Kingdom, which I loved when they visited and, going through the mirror and really experiencing what Cure Sword went through and kind of what made her so, intense, because she, takes the role so seriously, and getting that story was really good. But then as we get to the end, we finally find out, what happened, because even she didn't really know. And with the princess sort of incapacitated and Joe didn't know either, we had to wait until Regina and Ace come together, because as we all suspected, they were related to the princess, and in this case they were actually two halves of her heart. that then manifested themselves as people.
Was along with little weird space baby eyes.
And so once they come together, we find out that it was actually the king who wanted to save his daughter so badly that he basically made a deal with the devil and was selfish and was willing to sacrifice the kingdom in order to save her. And that turns him into King Selfish, or really lets King Selfish be reborn, because it was like this huge act of selfishness. Can we just talk about for a minute how amazing it was to have the big bad actually have a real story?
Yeah, I mean, once again, as you've mentioned, your complaint a lot of times with PreCure is the bad guy is, I'm Lord Evil Stuff. I was made from pure evil, and that's my backstory.
And it's really unfortunate, because usually, like, the lieutenants, let's say, we'll call them, of the big bad guy end up being much more interesting, than the big bad, because he's just a big monster. But in this case, King Selfish, there was like, yes, thank you for having, like, a real story. And I thought, really, like, kind of a story that you could understand and, you could, like, get behind the thinking there. So you made him, like, a really relatable villain. And I do think, though, that as a villain, even though he had a great backstory, he doesn't have a real, like, role. It's not like we see the king and he is being evil and, like, he has a personality as being evil. He has just turned into a monster.
But hey, it's better than nothing.
Besides, all the personality went to the real, actual King Selfish, who was not the big monstery man, but was one of the lieutenants that we had been with all along. And it was like, oh, I never remember his name. I'm just like,
Bell.
old dude, Bell. And he, I was pretty surprised, and in a totally good way, that he ended up being like, no, actually, it was me all along. I really liked that. I have to say that Doki, I feel the end of the show, I think, was one of the strongest PreCure endings ever. Mm-hmm. Because it kind of, like, just had all this potential at the beginning that it really lost in the middle, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it just ended so strongly that it made me sort of forget some of my complaints.
When it was like, all right, we wasted enough time on the treadmill, time to get back to the main story. It really kicked that up again.
It was good. You were like, it was like glued. We were silent, when we were learning the real backstory and, like, the Card Kingdom, and when Joe finally came back and we found out about, the king and, Cure Ace and Regina and the spear. It just, like, all really came together. God, the filler of the show was so tedious. It was so unfortunate, and maybe it's coming off Smile, but first I want to say that, of course, with a show like PreCure, with a franchise show like this, you're going to have filler. I'm not complaining that there was filler. Like, I'm really not, because it's just inevitable. 10, 15, 20 episodes in the middle of the series. It happens every single time. Be prepared for it. That's what it does. It's selling merchandise and, whatever. You can make that filler fun. You can make it really good, and if you're watching every week, you don't mind, because it's just a one-off. I watch it with other things, that's fine. Smile had the strongest, like, some of the strongest filler of a PreCure show, and that made up for the fact that Smile didn't have, like, a really good story, but
it was just always fun.
It was so fun and hilarious. So much of Dokidoki's filler was uninteresting.
Or it was a lot of, like, I noticed they went through a very familiar cycle of story, then pause, and let's do a story about each of the cures that's supposed to fill in a little of their backstory. But a lot of times it was just, all right, Cure Clover is gonna go here, and we'll learn about her friend over here. And that was an okay episode, and of course there was also all the filler episodes just with I.
Those were the worst. I'm horrible.
Except for the one where I becomes evil. And what do you call it? Has like that Mafia Don outfit.
I am such a weird character because the minute she enters the show, she hypnotizes Mana's mom into thinking that that's her daughter. And I'm like, what happens at the end when, like, you've ripped her out of the arms of this mother? But whatever. PreCure didn't deal with that.
No, Kate!
Also, everyone seems to not notice this flying baby. Like
I think the funniest thing is, and because we're talking about spoilers, Joe so gets shafted because during the final battle, they basically, Joe, this battle is for women. You as a weak man can go over there and protect the baby.
You know what, though? It's happened the other way around so much that I don't mind that they did it.
Oh, I just had to point out that, like, it was the classic role reversal of the genders of, like, you're just a man, so just, what do you call it? You don't have enough woman power to be in this battle. Take care of the baby.
Just stay over there, all right? We'll protect you.
Then Joe learns that his fiance is gone forever, and then basically, oh, you can become the president of the new Trump Republic and take care of the baby.
Well, he did become president.
Yes. But it's like they stuck him with the he even mentions, like, and they kind of just stuck me with the presidency, so I took it because I'm a responsible guy, and now I have to take care of the baby that's a fragment of my fiance's soul. And I just expect that.
That's so progressive. It's so progressive of PreCure.
But I just expect that.
Also, the fact that the Trump kingdom, you reminded me that also the fact that the Trump kingdom is restored and goes from being a monarchy to a republic is really progressive also.
I like how the king, when they save him, he just retires from...
He's like, well, I'm done. And it's like, well, I think that's for the best. Because you did sell out your kingdom. So...
I'm gonna live on Earth where I have not sold out their people, so they probably won't string me up, and I'll just live with Mana.
Everyone just lives with Mana's family. Back to the filler, though, it was just so weak. And it also becomes, in this middle section, sort of the Cure Ace show. Cure Ace and Friends! I mean, I made the joke that even the staff are like, it's like Cure Ace is like has a siren song that she sings to the staff, or if she speaks, because you'll notice that in a lot of the later episodes after Aguri is like a friend with them, the only way an episode can be not about Cure Ace is for her to like not speak the whole episode. If she starts talking, it becomes about Cure Ace, because the one that stands out to me is that episode later on when Cure Sword wants to sing a song to Regina to get their feelings across. And then it becomes like, it's like, you know, this is about Cure Sword, it's about music, and then it like becomes like all about Cure Ace and how she doesn't get it. And it's like, who cares? Like, shut up.
Yeah.
It's not about you, lady.
And it's almost, and when you mentioned it, it became so crystal clear, because the first half of the episode starts with Cure Sword being like, you know, I was so wrong to hate Regina, and Mana was right. You know, she's actually like a cool person who's kind of been brainwashed by King Selfish. And, you know, I've been hating her for the wrong reasons. I'm going to write the song that's going to, like, get to her heart and remind her of why we were friends and break King Selfish's brainwashing. And it's all about her. And then, literally, Aguri speaks, and it just becomes her episode about, like, I don't understand why everybody
is trying to help Regina and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, like, it doesn't need to be about you. I liked Cure Ace. Like, it's not that I didn't like her, but she really takes over such a focus in the middle that I think it actually brought the show down and actually diminishes from the really great last few episodes where we finally learn Cure Ace's backstory and find out about like the big reveal about who she really is. Those episodes were so strong, and like I wouldn't have changed anything about those episodes. But by the time we got to them, it was like, okay, and again, it's the episode all about Cure Ace. And it was just like, this is not about her, and you know, there's so much else going on, and I felt like it diminished a lot from the show.
And you could also once again
like, shove to the side.
You could also once again tell which is the favored Cure by how much money they throw into their transformation.
Oh my god. Cure Ace's transformation is also shown in full more than anybody else because hers doesn't fit in with the others, so that they could like intersplice it. So it's whatever. I mean, I didn't dislike the character, but I thought that it was sort of like this weird refocusing of the show, when really the show should have been more focused on Rosetta, who gets the shaft in the show, and she's awesome. She's pretty much like Batman, and they just throw her to the side.
Yeah, and what's funny is I remember that, well, once again, to bring up Heartcatch, there was Suomi and Erica who you saw grow and were not fighters. But then when Cure Sunshine comes in as a martial artist, she totally uses, even though she's a newer Cure, her martial arts totally lets her catch up and even be better than those two, because she just has like that physicality that just totally lets her win as a Cure. And we see that Cure Rosetta is totally a badass martial artist, but then they're like, and here's the power of shield, so you could never use your martial arts.
And in the show, they always, like, break her shield to show how badass whatever monster it is, so she's constantly just looks like a loser.
She'll be like, hey guys, I'm blah blah!
And she's, like I said, she's freaking Batman. She has, like, a giant mansion and a crazy butler and, like, all these gadgets and all this money and, like, whatever. And it's like, why does no one care?
Kate, it was a while ago, but if everybody just watches one episode, what's the one episode they should watch now that I think about her being Batman?
Which one?
The episode where we get Cure Butler.
Oh, yeah. You see? Oh, wasted potential, man. And I do think that, in a way, the character relationships with each other aren't the strongest with the side characters. Like, I think Mana's a really strong personality, and I think, you know, kind of her relationships with everyone are good, but, like, sort of the development of a lot of characters, I don't think everybody gets equal treatment. Sword obviously grows quite a bit because she's like basically fish out of water, so I think she gets a lot. And then Agari also, you know, again, she's from, well, that whole story is so crazy, and of course, you know, her relationship with everyone really changes, but I think that some of the other characters, it's just not.
And Mana gets a lot of time to shine when she interacts with Regina.
Mana is so crazy. She's like one of those people that, in a way, just sort of reminded me of one of those people who always needs a project. because she starts off the show, like, really obsessed with Cure Sword and wanting to, like, bring her into the group and fix everything and, like, make her happy, and it's all about Cure Sword. And then Regina shows up, she's like, who's Cure Sword? Regina! Everything's about Regina! Regina disappears for a while. It's Cure Ace! We gotta help Cure Ace! And then finally comes back around.
But they kind of mention that in the show, that, like, one of the reasons that Cure Diamond is so important in Mana's life is she's the one person who occasionally is like, whoa, Miss Project, slow your roll, and, like, let's not kill yourself. The one person who realizes that Mana is a human that, like, has limits and has to rein her in every once in a while.
Even though Mana does not acknowledge limits, which is part of her charm and part of what lets her defeat the villain, you know, in the end, I think. Oh, I just thought of other bad filler, which was, like, anything that was, like, focused on the mascots was also, like,
oh yeah,
terrible.
Like, Davy was, like, the only one who was, like, anyway useful. Or, like, we can become human!
No, stop now. Yeah, the filler was just not good, man. Just wasn't enjoyable most of the time.
It just made you really miss the story episodes.
Exactly, and I think, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but the story was so strong that you really wanted, you were like, man, I want to get back to that. What's going on? But then, and so the filler was so weak that it just really created this huge gap between
what was another piece of missed potential? But I mean, once again, not like this ruined the show or anything, but the fact that there were those old Cures who had defeated King Selfish in the past, who we saw a little bit when they were getting the mirror and came up one or two other times. Like, that old Cure team really, kind of like how there were the old Cures in Heartcatch, I really thought was something they could have, they didn't really go into too much, but was... And how, like, there was that ancient turtle dragon who was, like, the first Cure's companion.
That was really cool stuff. Yeah, you're right. I would have liked to see more of that. But you've also reminded me of one of the other things I thought was really strong about the ending was that they defeat King Selfish, but it is stated that he will come back. That selfishness will always exist in the world and you can't eliminate it and everybody's selfish sometimes and that he is, defeated for now, but eventually the PreCure have to stay around because that they will come back and you'll have to defend the world again. I really liked that it wasn't like, and now everything will be perfect until the end of time. I thought that was really nicely done.
And as you mentioned, one of the big interesting things is since Mana outs herself in, like, the next to last episode, they are now permanent Cures who, like, oh no, a satellite is crashing to the Earth! Cures to the rescue! Do-do-do!
I really liked that, too. And it kind of leads in a little bit to Happiness, where the Cures are known and famous, sort of.
And that the Trump Kingdom and, like, basically King Selfishness and his, like, big last battle creates that rift between the two worlds.
Okay, yeah.
So now there's, like, trade between the regular world and the Trump Kingdom, and people now can travel back and forth, and there's, like, diplomatic envoys and stuff like that. And because usually the magical creatures go back to their home and maybe can occasionally visit or something, but here it is like an open highway. And
such a strong ending. That's why I feel like this was still a really, really good show, even though the middle section just lags.
You know what you forgot to mention, which is also the biggest proof that the middle section lags? The two hobo clown villains.
Oh gosh, those were terrible villains. Always happens too. That, like, they gotta create some more lieutenant villains that nobody cares about, and everybody wants you to go back to the original.
Because there was Belle, Ira, and the girl, and they were all fun and cool, and we always liked them. And then they were like, we're these other two guys who look like hobo clowns.
We're total losers. Yeah, of course they had to show up. Man.
When they died, man.
It was satisfying, wasn't it? It was like, yes, finally.
Good riddance to bad rubbish.
But yeah, so I feel like it started off really strong and it ended really strong. And I think that still makes it a worthwhile, show. So, such a strong ending. And the story is, really good every time it comes up. It's really interesting. It's just in the filler. Sometimes they also just seem to forget that things exist. Like, Joe just disappears for, 40 years. Is Joe, locked in the basement? Like, where's that guy?
He's like, I'm gonna go find the crown.
I know he was off doing something important, but yeah, sometimes it just came off very weird. Like, people would get forgotten in the filler where they're not totally thinking about the overall story.
Or when they find the princess's body in the ice and they just dump it in the basement for 12 episodes.
Is no one dealing with this? No one's worried about that? No one's doing anything? Okay. Still, I thought it was a good PreCure show. I really enjoyed it. It's not my favorite, but
it's definitely one that if you're going through your list of PreCures, definitely one to watch as opposed to one to if I'm not doing anything, Splash Star, I'll watch this one.
That's true. It's definitely worth watching. Just beware of... We have something else to do as you watch the filler episodes.
All right, see you guys next time.